Part 22. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 211. Roar. Following a long roar, many mutant beasts gathered around the white tiger roared and roared. Immediately afterwards, countless alien beasts' eyes were bloodshot, and their bodies moved towards Shura to bite and kill. At this time, the white tiger has no regard for the laws of the jungle world. It must swallow this zombie alive. The chilling atmosphere condensed the air. Facing the many ferocious beasts coming to kill, Shura's advancing figure suddenly stopped. Fire hell! As Shura's deep voice echoed, the black flame giant sword in his hand stood in front of him. The surrounding endless black flames that seemed to come from the 9 nether hells were all injected into the giant's sword. Shura held the giant's sword with both arms and swung it suddenly. High of Karma. Flames that burn to the extreme spurt out from the sword. The burning flames are like the karmic fire that burns all the sins in the world. The boundless sea of fire mixed with hot waves swept toward the many beasts ahead. In an instant, the deadly sea of fire composed of black flames instantly engulfed countless invading mutant ferocious beasts. Not a cry, not a trace of blood. Everywhere you look is a wave of karmic fire that wipes out everything and engulfs all things. Feeling the burning dry air, everyone subconsciously narrowed their eyes. In a daze, everyone could only vaguely see a vague figure, standing in the sea of fire, like a god of fire. Suddenly, a huge white figure rushed out of the sea of fire, with an ear-splitting tiger roar. I saw a huge, snow-white tiger rushing out of the endless black flames, its whole body filled with murderous aura. And behind the huge white tiger, countless black shadows vaguely appeared, following the white tiger towards Shura. Some of these figures look like various beasts, while others have human forms. These phantoms all looked like they were flexing their claws, with dark bodies and ferocious faces, as if they were wronged souls crawling out of hell. Working for the tiger. These are the dead souls who have been killed by white tigers for many years. They will be eaten alive by white tigers during their lifetime, and will be enslaved by the souls of the enemies who killed them after death. They will truly die in peace. The majestic resentment seems to be telling the panic and despair before their death, but now they want to vent it on all living creatures. Tearing apart all the lives in front of them is the only obsession of these innocent souls. The specific faces of these innocent souls can no longer be clearly seen, and only their infinitely miserable screams and wails can be heard. Rich resentment erupted from the illusory form, and it crawled behind the white tiger like a zombie. A mere dead soul dares to make noise. Shura shouted sharply. He wearing a ghost mask on his head looked more like a terrifying existence in the endless hell than these innocent souls. Hell won't accept you, I will accept you. Shura raised his arm and thrust the black flame giant sword into the ground. In an instant, the surrounding ground began to expand and roll, and spider web-like cracks appeared on the ground. Black flames are billowing, and burning black ashes are floating on the ground. With Shura as the center, the earth in all directions suddenly cracked, and dense pillars of flame rose into the sky. The fire rain wrapped in hot lava falls from the sky, which is extremely conspicuous under the night. It comes from the purification of hell karma fire. Immediately afterwards, pairs of arms as black as ink suddenly emerged from the shadows under those innocent souls, dragging these resentful souls into the infinite dark space. And those innocent souls poured out by the black flames evaporated and dissipated in an instant, completely turning into nothingness. Shura's figure stepped forward, and the roar of a tiger came from his ears. A cloud of black energy suddenly rose behind him. Blocked the ferocious blow of the white tiger. Ghost-faced Shura's demonic wings vibrated like flowing fire, and black flames suddenly swept outward like a ripple wave. At the same time, Shura suddenly waved the giant black flame blade in his hand, sending the huge white figure behind him flying dozens of meters away. The white tiger fell to the ground in a miserable state. While controlling the demon, its soul was also bound to the demon. Countless ghosts were burned by the fire of karma, and it itself suffered a huge backlash. Shura's figure stepped out of the black flames and came to Baihu. His expression could not be seen under the mask. Dragon slaying? You're still very early. Suddenly, Shura stretched out his right arm and grabbed the white tiger's head tightly. The blazing black flames of karma erupted from the palm of his hand, carrying the domineering power of devouring all things. Even the powerful body of Mangshan Qianhu can never withstand the flames burning at such a close range. What's even more frightening is that this black flame is like gangrene attached to the bone, swallowing up the entire body of the white tiger the moment it is stained on the head. In just a few breaths, the white tiger's huge body was swallowed up by the black flames. Just when everyone thought this arrogant and powerful beast king was completely dead, the rest of the white tiger's body suddenly exploded, and a ball of white light was carried by the strong wind and fled into the distance. There was also the faint sound of tiger roaring in the white light. However, the next second, a group of strange-looking pink butterflies suddenly floated in the sky, instantly surrounding the white light. The white tiger beast's soul in the white light suddenly found itself in an extremely silent red space. At the end of the space, there was a huge butterfly that covered the sky and the sun, spreading its wings. Its pink wings were strange and deadly. In the unknown space, there was a faint sound of a girl's crazy laughter and a white tiger's desperate roar. On the battlefield in the wilderness, a black figure with a ghost mask on his head and bare upper body walked slowly, with terrifying black flames wrapped around his body, and followed by countless black shadow monsters with red eyes. Under their feet, there were countless shriveled corpses of mutated beasts. At this moment, Ji Yufen was covered in scars. He looked at the figure of Shura walking slowly, but he had no fear at all. Standing up with the help of his sister, the man called the White God of Death looked at the Shura of Hell with indifferent eyes. The surrounding humans all looked at Shura and the black shadow monster behind him with extremely panic, fearing that they would come forward to reap their lives in the next second. Suddenly, the sky exploded, and a burst of cannon suddenly came from the distant horizon. It's a large army. Our reinforcements have arrived. Many surviving soldiers were overjoyed when they saw the vehicles gradually becoming clearer in the distance. Mu Qiu, under the Shura mask, also noticed the traces of the army in the distance, which was brewing a destructive aura. Feeling the majestic energy gained from swallowing the white tiger in his body, Mu Qiu knew that his goal had been achieved. Sir Death, we will meet again. A low sneer came from under the Shura mask. Then Shura and the many black shadow monsters behind him turned into phantoms and escaped into the endless shadows under their feet. Looking at the disappearing Shura and the Eternal Night organization, clear gunfire sounded in their ears. Everyone present breathed a sigh of relief, and the feeling of surviving a disaster came naturally. Only Shueqianya, who was wearing a purple shirt, tightly grasped the black round ring in her hand that continuously released corpse chi, and her face was tangled. At a certain moment, Shueqianya seemed to have made up her mind, and her body turned into a grey mist and disappeared in the air. The grey fog drifted in the direction sensed by a certain round ring. Finally, the grey fog gradually condensed on the edge of a cliff several kilometers away from the wilderness battlefield. Shueqianya's figure emerged from it. She tightly grasped the black round ring in her hand and looked up at a huge rock on the edge of the cliff. A black figure sat cross-legged on the boulder. The sky was just at dawn at this moment, and the fiery red sun rose from the bottom of the cliff. With the rising sunlight, the girl saw the appearance of the black figure clearly. Wearing a signature black windbreaker, with a hideous mask with red face and fangs on his head. Just at this moment, the ghost-faced man turned his head to look in the direction of the girl and slowly took off the mask on his face. Two naughty students will not be liked, Xiao. The breeze blew, and a familiar face appeared in front of the girl. The dawn sunlight shone down, reflecting the man's indifferent smile like a spring breeze. Teacher. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 212. A group of white moths suddenly flew over the ruins of a desolate city. Below are countless ferocious and terrifying zombies, claws and teeth bared, looking for raw food. And when these white moths flew across the street, their wings flapped and clouds of purple mist fell like snowflakes. And when these terrifying poisonous powders touched the zombies on the ground, these disgusting and terrifying zombies actually let out shrill wails from their mouths. As the miserable wailings filled the place, the fleshy bodies of the zombies that had been exposed to the poisonous mist rotted and fell off at a speed visible to the naked eye. The vocal cords of these zombies are blurred. Apart from the ferocious expressions on their faces, they can only express the bone-deep pain through their twisted limbs. As the moths flew away, even the earth was corroded into huge pits when it touched these rich poisonous mist. Large areas of zombie flesh rotted and turned into white bones. The roars of zombies in the city became more intense, and a woman's cry could be faintly heard in the air. Countless moths flying in the sky flew to a tall building. Moths all over the sky gathered quickly in the air, and finally condensed into a huge moth with a human face under its belly. The wings of the giant moth were a strange purple color on the surface, but the underbelly was pale. The face was pale and haggard, and it could vaguely be seen as the face of a woman. And when the figure of the sly-faced poisonous moth appeared above the building, two figures of purple-robed men also appeared on the rooftop. On an eaves on the roof of the building below, a rag doll with the image of a prince sat quietly. The prince doll's eyes were dark, and its head rotated 180 degrees out of thin air, staring straight at the two mysterious purple-robed men behind it. That idiot tiger actually attacked the human army without authorization, and now he has got himself involved in it. He is indeed a waste. Even the words that come out of his mouth are as childish as a child's. This mysterious force that claims to be the Eternal Night Dynasty has also attracted the attention of the immortals, but so far no details have been discovered. We cannot rule out the possibility that he will become the enemy of our holy religion in the future. One of the purple-robed men said. As for that Shura, it has been proven that he does have destructive strength, and he killed the Tiger King in yesterday's battle. The Eternal Night Dynasty emerged quietly, and the world's current understanding of it is still the tip of the iceberg. It is no wonder that the alien church attaches great importance to it. But the current strength displayed by the Yonjai dynasty is far from enough to compete with the heterogeneous religion. After all, the 12 immortal priests of the alien religion are destructive-level existences per capita. The strange-faced poisonous moth in the sky suddenly said, "You human forces are really strong in numbers." The voice was still that of a human woman, but there was a hoarse cry in it, which made people feel a chill in their scalps. Then how do you ensure that this force will not interfere again in the next battle? After all, a destruction-level existence plays an important role in the battle situation. Another man in purple robe said, "Based on yesterday's situation, it seems that the Yonjai organization came specifically for the Tiger King. But there is no guarantee that this organization will still appear." A questioning voice came from the doll under the eaves. "Is this the foolproof thing you said at the beginning?" The man in purple robe said, "Your Excellency, King Ling, please calm down. Although there are some deviations in the plan, it will still not affect the overall situation." The man in purple robe turned to look at his companion. "How is the situation over there?" Another purple-robed man said, "We are generally ready, but it still needs some time. This still requires Your Majesty the Spirit King to buy some time for us." The two purple-robed men lowered their heads and looked at the prince doll below. The pupils of the prince puppet were made of buttons. After a moment of silence, a childish voice came out of the doll. "When this is done, I want the souls of all human beings. Without the king tiger to compete with it, it can make its demands without restraint. Deal. I hope the Spirit King can keep his promise and delay the human allies for a while." The prince puppet snorted coldly and turned his head slowly. Below him was a sea of corpses in the ruins of the city. "I'm not that useless tiger. The door to the laboratory was opened, and a thin man with a pale face and a weak body slowly walked out of the door. When the man walked into the laboratory, the interior scene was also revealed before his eyes. The vast space is extremely vast, and the huge laboratory, which is as big as a stadium, is filled with various tall and gorgeous experimental equipment. The thin man slowly walked to the deepest part of the laboratory, where a huge experimental instrument stood. The tall body, which is hundreds of meters tall, occupies the ceiling of the laboratory. The main body is composed of several huge petri dishes. Countless thick pipes filled with unknown fluorescent green liquid were poured into these reagent-like petri dishes. In the central test tube, a human brain was inserted into a dozen electrical wires and rested in the nutrient solution extracted from many petri dishes. The thin man wore a scientific research-style white coat and walked to the culture medium container containing the brain. "Sir, Captain," he sent a message that the large coalition forces have been assembled and are now heading towards Dongshan City. The man's voice was also very weak when he spoke, as if he was a dying patient with a terminal illness. After the thin man finished speaking, he stood still without moving. After a while, a cold machine voice suddenly came from somewhere. According to the original plan. The extremely ethereal voice echoed throughout the laboratory, making it difficult to hear where it came from. It seemed that the sound of this machine came from the brain device in front of it, and it seemed to come from all directions of the laboratory. Faced with the sudden strange sound, the thin man did not panic at all. He just nodded slowly, yes. He turned around and left the huge laboratory. The heavy door of the laboratory closed again. When the thin man left, the empty laboratory fell into silence. The only sound left was the ticking of the surrounding equipment. Outside the building where the laboratory was located, a bird flew over the building, and behind it appeared a huge city full of technology. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 213. Yuhei Base, among the familiar central high-rises. Eternal Night Dynasty. Xiao Hanyan stood in front of the glass of the office, looking down at the human streets below. The guards behind him reported a series of battle situations from the battlefield. Xiao Hanyan's expression became moved when he heard the news that the team led by Ji Yufen was attacked by a destructive beast and Yanjai Shura reappeared. It seems that every time she hears the words Eternal Night and Shura, this mysterious organization that emerged not long ago can give her a new round of shock. That Shura actually has destructive level strength. Xiao Hanyan frowned slightly, which was obviously something that no one had expected. The guard behind him nodded heavily, with a look of horror on his face after learning the information. According to intelligence from the front line, the troops led by Captain Ji were defeated at the hands of a destructive beast claiming to be the Mangshan Dome Tiger and its army of beasts. After that, Shura appeared and fought with Mangshan Qianhu, and finally burned it under the black flames. It was initially judged that Shura had reached the level of destruction. Did Shura always hide his strength before? Xiao Hanyan thought to herself, if this Shura really has destructive power. That includes the previous danger assessment of this mysterious Eternal Night Dynasty rising to another level. He can freely enter and exit the base regardless of barrier detection, and he also has an immeasurable army of ninjas who come and go without a trace. To this day, this mysterious organization has only revealed the tip of the iceberg. All kinds of powerful abilities demonstrate the terror of this force. In addition, 4 teams have met in the suburbs of Anyuan City. In addition to the heavy casualties suffered by the law enforcement forces under Captain Ji, the other 3 teams also suffered certain losses in strength. Now that the large forces have made some adjustments, they will pass through Linyuan City ahead and arrive at the Dongshan base where the rescue will be conducted soon. There are many S-level strong men in the army, and there are countless high-level awakened ones. There are also 2 destruction-level strong men, Wang Daipen and Wu Fa. Even the huge zombie tide will be destroyed by this coalition of human bases. Xiao Hanyan nodded, but the solemn look on his face did not dissipate for a long time. She looked up at the distant sky. Through the glass, she could vaguely see a group of dark clouds sweeping over the distant sky. Somehow, she always had a vague premonition of uneasiness in her heart, and as the haze in the distance approached, this premonition gradually spread in her heart. Bonfires rose up in the silent wilderness, and it seemed that the countryside was much more lively than the strangely deserted city after standing up. A large force of human coalition forces camped here for a short rest. Hundreds of modified vehicles were parked on both sides of the wilderness. After days of brutal fighting, the tires were covered with old bloodstains, and even the car body was covered with deep claw marks, which was shocking. The air was still filled with the rich blood after the battle, and the ground in the distance was covered with shriveled beast corpses and human limbs, showing the brutality of last night's battle everywhere. Countless ordinary humans died under the claws of the beast Sun Yan, and the mutilated corpses were full of claw marks and torn wounds of the beast. Even the many awakened ones are not immune to this disaster. In the team led by Ji Yufeng, most of the awakened ones perished among the Mangshan Qianhu and his herd of mutant beasts. Ji Yufeng woke up from the overloaded state of his body after a day of deep sleep. After being constantly stimulated by the drugs, his body was always under severe backlash pain, and he had long been accustomed to this kind of physical pain. With his body wrapped in dense bandages, the man known as the White God of Death stood in the wilderness and looked into the distance. That's where countless soldiers from his law enforcement team died. This unprecedented battle with the mutated beasts cost nearly 70% of his troops. There was still no expression on Ji Yufeng's face, he just stared quietly. The sound of light footsteps came from behind, and Wei Ying, who was dressed in military uniform, walked to Ji Yufeng's side and comforted him. "You don't have to blame yourself. The situation at that time was irreversible for either of us. It was a real beast craze, if not for the sudden appearance of the Evernight dynasty. Everyone, including Ji Yufeng, is afraid that they will die under the fangs of Mangshan Qianhu. In the end, he turned into an innocent ghost driven by slavery, and will never be reincarnated." When Wei Ying's words reached his ears, Ji Yufeng slowly shook his head. What he cares about is the deep feeling of powerlessness in his heart when the real fatal crisis comes. Wei Ying patted Ji Yufeng's shoulder and turned to leave. As a soldier, he has experienced countless life and death. To him, the word sacrifice means too many things. After a while, the breeze blew through Ji Yufeng's white hair. The body was covered with bandages, and underneath the bandages were hideous scars and bloody scabs. Ji Yufeng slowly walked towards the battlefield, and a familiar figure wearing a black robe walked towards him. There was still that leisurely smile on his face, which was in sharp contrast to the tired-looking soldiers around him. Ji Yufeng looked at Mu Qiu, who was coming towards him, with indifferent eyes. 2 figures, one black and one white, passed by each other, and Ji Yufeng heard Mu Qiu's teasing words. "I've said it before, the law of the jungle is not just a law among beasts." The footsteps behind him gradually faded away, but Ji Yufeng's steps paused. "Is this person the Ice King?" On the hillside in the distance, a short monk with a hunched back looked down at the 2 people passing by below. Zhang Qinggui stood respectfully aside, with a string of sandalwood beads in his hand. "Yes, master, you see." Wu Fa stared at Mu Qiu's departing back, shook his head, and said in a heavy voice, "The Buddha said, I can't see through." For ordinary humans, even some high-level awakeners, Wu Fa can use his supernatural powers to find out some details. But only the Ice King in front of him made him unable to see any details. What he saw in Mu Qiu's body was pitch black, like a chaotic void. Could he really be the Savior's son in the prophecy? Wu Fa once used his supernatural powers to see a prophecy. The prophecy shows that in a battle called Redemption, the Savior Son will appear, and he is the only hope for the salvation of all mankind. Suddenly, a roar of engines came from the distant horizon. Countless people's eyes gathered in front. I saw a team of people rushing from the wilderness, and the riders were still shouting loudly. The leading motorcycle was full of red flames, and there was a long tail behind the tires, which was very cool. Seeing this cool motorcycle, everyone understood that this team was the Shenlong Society under the command of Wang Daipen, one of the 3 destructive guardians of Yuhe. So far, the 4 coalition teams have been completely assembled, and they will reach the end of their code-named Redemption battle after crossing the last city, Dongshan Base. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 214. Woohoo! There was a sudden thunderous explosion on the quiet mountain road. Immediately afterwards, the roar of the locomotive engine came from far and near. At the end of the mountain road, I saw a huge convoy speeding past on the mountain road. What just made a sound was a row of punk motorcycles in front of the convoy. They had a windy appearance and long tail flames trailing behind their tires. Behind the motorcycle, there are modified vehicles like flowing water. Looking around, there is a continuous stretch from the main section of the mountain road to the edge. The tracks of the tanks dragged long ruts on the ground, and the barrels of the military vehicles were raised and ready to go. After the convoy, hundreds of tall streamlined mechas followed, with jets of water surging beneath their feet. The speed is not slower than those speeding modified vehicles. This mighty force is the base coalition supporting Dongshan Base. In front of the many vehicles was a red motorcycle. A thin, dark-skinned man held the handle tightly and rode like 1,000 people. The body modified with special materials is burning with boiling flames. Wang Daipen's whole body was like a flaming meteor rushing across the mountain road. The scattered zombie monsters along the way were smashed to pieces by the powerful momentum of the burning locomotive before they could launch an attack. The huge team passed by on the mountain road in just a moment. The tires swept away smoke and dust, and even the ground trembled slightly. The built-in communicator in the car announced, "We are still 5 kilometers away from the next city, Linyuan City. Please be prepared. After passing through Linyuan City, you will arrive at the rescue location of the strip, Dongshan Base." The announcement spread throughout the entire convoy through the communicator, and all the soldiers in the team were ready. This means that the final battle is coming. And when huge vehicles pass by on the mountain road, no one noticed that on the hillside in the distance, there was an inconspicuous prince puppet staring directly at the convoy. Smoke fills the air, and the rag doll in the image of the prince hangs his head. A deep bloody light flashed in the pupils made of black buttons. Speaking of Linyuan City, I was a frequent visitor here back then. The fat man was driving and once again spoke in a mature way. Linyuan City is a big tourist city, and the annual passenger flow is 3 to 5 times that of other cities. The scenery is endless and the scenery is magnificent. Immediately afterwards, the fat man's face showed a look of yearning. There are outstanding people, especially the little girls in the city, each one is smarter than the last. I just don't know what the city is like now. As the fat man spoke, he turned his head leisurely, but found that no one behind him was listening to him. Mu-Chiu looked away from the car window and said with a smile, "Then you should have a good experience." In the back seat, a girl in a purple shirt was looking deeply at Mu-Chiu's back. The latter seemed to feel something and turned back to Shueqianya with a smile. The girl's cold face unexpectedly turned slightly red, and she turned her head away in panic. A complicated feeling of being seen through lingered in my mind. Under the dawn sky, Mu-Chiu held an evil ghost mask, and her gentle words with a slight smile still echoed in the girl's ears. "Are you surprised? Life is interesting because of the intertwining of all kinds of surprising things." While everyone was talking and laughing, the vehicle had passed through the mountain road and sped along the highway for several kilometers. Soon, a huge city appeared in front of everyone's eyes. What's going on? But when the vehicle drove into the city, everyone's expressions froze. The city in front of us was obscured by thick fog. Gray fog enveloped the entire city. The surrounding high-rise buildings are even more difficult to see clearly due to the thick fog. Even the field of vision was gradually lost due to the thick fog, and the surrounding vehicles disappeared. All you could hear was the roar of horns and engines coming from all around. Not long after entering this foggy city, the sound of vehicle collisions could be heard all around. Looking back on the road they came from, there was a haze behind them, and their retreat was also obscured by heavy fog. A convoy of tens of thousands of people was instantly lost in this huge city. Wei Ying's voice came from the communicator in the car. The situation has changed. Everyone should get off the car and gather together. Be careful not to disperse and be vigilant. As Wei Ying gave the order, the sound of car doors opening gradually came from the surrounding area, accompanied by noisy voices. Mu Qiu and his party also opened the car door and stepped out. However, when a group of people stepped out of the car, they noticed that the roar of the surrounding cars suddenly stopped. The surrounding environment was obscured by thick fog, making it difficult to see the direction, and the originally noisy human voices disappeared. The fat man shouted several times, but received no response. The whole city was silent, and several people could even hear each other's breathing. The team suddenly seemed to be in an uninhabited city shrouded in fog. Everyone tried to get back into the car, but when they turned around, they were surprised to find that the off-road vehicle that was just beside them had also disappeared. All kinds of weird things are announcing that there is some unknown danger in the city. The team members walked forward cautiously, not knowing what was hidden in the fog. Mu Qiu stretched out his hand and groped forward tentatively, then turned his head and said to everyone, "This city is a little weird, be careful, let's hold hands and don't get lost." After saying that, Mu Qiu's face showed a gentle smile. Mu Qiu bent down and slowly stretched out his hand to the purple-shirt girl behind him. Shueqianya didn't know why, but she always felt uneasy in her heart. When Mu Qiu stretched out his hand to her, Shueqianya was startled, but still stretched out her tender little hand. The two palms, one big and one small, were about to touch. But suddenly, the black round ring on the finger suddenly flashed a black light. Shueqianya woke up in a flash, pulled her hand back, and took several steps back. "You are not him." Mu Qiu in front of her still had a faint smile on his face. "Xiao, what are you talking about? I am your teacher." After that, Mu Qiu's figure gradually approached Shueqianya. Shueqianya's purple eyes were deep, and she tightly grasped the black round ring in her hand. "Who are you?" What's more terrifying is that the figures of the fat man, Lin Feng, Su Wen, Yu Qi, and others around her also gathered in the direction of Shueqianya. These people all had a weird smile on their faces that was as programmed as if they were programmed. "Yes, Xiao, how could you mistake your teacher? How could your teacher be fake?" As these figures approached, their faces gradually changed from familiar teammates. Blue ghosts with human outlines emerged one after another, and surrounded Shueqianya with their fangs and claws. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, Yu. Chapter 215. Big Sun Golden Crow. A roar was heard in the mist. Then, a ball of crimson flame smashed into the thick haze. Wang Deipen stood in the mist, with crimson flames boiling all over his body. Around him, his former subordinates all turned into blue ghosts. The faces of some of his subordinates had not completely disappeared, and they slowly approached him while shouting "Boss." But these ghosts seemed to be afraid of the burning yang energy on his body, and they did not launch an attack. Wang Deipen raised his arms high, and a huge ball of flames gathered in his hands and rose into the air. The fiery red beam shone into the deep mist, and the prototype of a golden crow could be seen faintly in the fireball. Wang Deipen shouted, and the huge fireball above his head instantly smashed into the ground with him as the center. The endless sea of fire boiled up, representing the angry flames sweeping the thick fog around. There was only a loud noise, like a golden crow hitting the sun. The earth cracked instantly, and flames spread all around. Wang Deipen walked out of the sea of fire, and the blue ghosts that had just gathered around him disappeared. But Wang Deipen's expression did not ease at all. The thick fog that had just been dispersed by the fireball he released condensed again. In the blink of an eye, he was lost in the thick fog again. Damn it, why doesn't that dead bald donkey take action? Wang Deipen cursed. The bald donkey he was talking about was naturally another destructive existence in the team, the strange monk Wufa. Although they were both destructive guardians, Wang Deipen's fire ability specialized in destruction and destruction. He did not have any outstanding attainments in spirit and soul. When he noticed that the people around him disappeared, the men of Shenglonghui were also covered by these blue ghosts. Wang Deipen immediately knew that he was in a space similar to an illusion. Although the existence inside could not threaten him who was strong, it would take some time for Wang Deipen to break through the fog. And the ability of Wufa was quite significant in targeting souls and illusions. But until this time, the monk had not taken action, which made Wang Deipen extremely annoyed. However, at this moment, a figure suddenly walked out of the fog in front of him. The flames on Wang Deipen's arm suddenly burst out. "Brother Peng, why are you so angry?" A familiar face appeared in front of Wang Deipen, which surprised Wang Deipen. Lao Chen. The man turned out to be one of his trusted subordinates. Since several S-level capable subordinates around him died one after another, Shenglonghui's high-strength combat power was instantly lost by half. The old Zhang in front of him was the new confidant he promoted. Wang Deipen was quite satisfied with Lao Zhang, his subordinate. While he was capable, he was also good at managing the affairs of Shenglonghui. Wang Deipen even considered increasing the training efforts to make him the second in command of Shenglonghui. "Why are you here?" Wang Deipen looked at his confidant with a scrutinizing look. But he was not afraid of the Yanjian released from his body at all, as if this person was not transformed by those blue ghosts. "Brother Peng, you see, you have done so many things for Yuhei on weekdays. Not only did you not get any rewards, but you also carried a bad reputation. Have those humans in Yuhei ever recognized your benefits?" Old Chen walked slowly in front of Wang Deipen, with a flattering smile on his face. But what he said made Wang Deipen's heart jump. "What do you mean?" Although the person in front of him looked like Old Chen, his words were completely different from usual. I saw that Old Chen was suddenly shrouded by a thick fog. When the thick fog dissipated, Old Chen's figure had disappeared. Instead, a mysterious man in a purple robe appeared in front of Wang Deipen. Heterogeneous religion. Wang Deipen's eyes flashed with horror, and he suddenly threw out a ball of fire. The fireball blasted towards the purple-robed man, but the latter floated up and dodged the attack. The voice of Old Chen came out of his mouth. "Has the Yuhei base given you anything in these years? Even Xiao Hanyan has always been that cold and aloof. Boss, don't you want to completely conquer her and make her kneel at your feet?" Wang Deipen's eyes were deep. "What have you been hiding here for so long? What on earth are you doing? You humans are really troublesome. Let's make it clear that I am only responsible for delaying time." Just then, a childish voice suddenly came from behind Wang Deipen. I saw a puppet in the image of a prince slowly condensing in the mist behind him. A pair of deep pupils stared straight at the two of them. Just as Wang Deipen was about to take action, the prince doll behind him suddenly said to the purple-robed man, "In that case, tell him our plan." Hearing this, Wang Deipen's eyes flashed with surprise. In a deep fog, a group of human-shaped blue ghosts surrounded a man in black and rushed to kill him. Mu Chiu's face was indifferent, and he stretched out his left hand. The endless ice mist turned into a piece of ice mist. Then, he spread his right palm and a ball of hot flames burst out. Ice in the left hand, Swanyan in the right palm. The black clothes behind him fluttered, and the cold light and firelight set off Mewtwo's handsome face. In an instant, countless ghosts that rushed to kill were frozen into ice cubes. And then, they were burned into ashes by the boundless fire from hell. The embers dispersed, and Mewtwo walked out of the thick fog, followed by the girl Yuichi in a corseted long skirt. Looking at the mist that had begun to condense again in front of him, Mewtwo smiled lightly. "Dire, did you see it?" Mewtwo could sense that he was currently in a combination of some kind of illusion and space barrier. The situation of others should be the same as him, trapped in the barrier formed by the fog. A strange pink butterfly was entangled on his shoulder, and the girl's crisp voice came. "These blue ghosts should be the souls condensed from the corpse. The souls refined by the method of raising souls and refining souls should be the same level as us." "Oh. Destruction level." Mewtwo tried to devour one of the blue ghosts, but found that these souls were scattered as if they were flying snow. The butterfly on the shoulder suddenly flew to the ground and turned into a barefoot girl in a red dress. Dire shook her head and said, "The opponent's real body should not be here, but just use the soul to stop us. Soul into thousands." Mewtwo was amazed. This ability is really as incredible as the immortal novels. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 216. Although the strength of these divided souls is generally weak, but it is more than enough to deal with ordinary humans and some low-level awakened ones. Then the location and timing of the appearance of these souls need to be studied. Are you right? Mewtwo suddenly turned her head and looked into the depths of the thick fog behind her. I saw a slim figure walking slowly deep in the mist. The figure of a woman can be vaguely seen, with a slender figure and a plump figure. It has a pair of erect ears on its head, and there are several shadows of furry tails appearing behind it. Lucientian. When the figure walked out of the fog, it was discovered that this woman was the subordinate that Mewtwo had just subdued not long ago. Lucientian, the spy of the Heterogen sect, possesses the power of the nine-tailed demon fox. Lucientian walked out of the fog, wearing a red cheongsam with a curvy figure. Coupled with her charming face that brought disaster to the country and the people, she turned out to be a beauty in the world. They work so hard to deliver information to you, but they didn't even say hello. Lucientian approached Mewtwo and was about to hug her, when she suddenly noticed a murderous intention emerging from her side. Lucientian shivered, and Foxtail shrank in fear. Turning around, he found a girl in a red dress next to Mewtwo staring at him unblinkingly, with a hint of red in her eyes. The experienced Lucientian immediately gave up her interest in teasing and turned to look at Mewtwo. The latter noticed these little movements of the two women, but didn't care much about it. He chuckled and said, Tell me, the heterogeneous religion has contacted you again." If Mewtwo guessed correctly, everyone in the army was now in such a foggy space. Domain skills like fog space that target large numbers of people may not necessarily contain many dangers. The main purpose is to trap the enemy's actions. But Lucientian was able to break through the foggy space set up by the destructive level powerhouse, and even accurately enter the barrier where Mewtwo was, showing that she did have some attainments in illusions. Lucientian said, "If I guess correctly, there should be the shadow of the heterogeneous religion behind this fog." Mewtwo's face was calm and she motioned for Lucientian to continue. Lucientian continued, "The sect still hasn't given any accurate information. They just told us to continue waiting. There will be a big battle in 2 days. Based on time, the main purpose of this fog should be to buy time and delay the coalition's actions." The corners of Mewtwo's mouth suddenly raised, You should have the answer in your mind, right? I really can't hide it from you. Lu Qianqian spread her hands, put her body close to Mu Qiu's ear and breathed out. If I guessed correctly, the real purpose of this church should be. An answer that shocked everyone came from Lu Qianqian's mouth. Mu Qiu's expression remained unchanged from beginning to end. So what are you going to do now? My lord Shura. Lu Qianqian's slim body was pressed against Mu Qiu's chest. She stretched out her hands to twist the hair between her temples, her ears were perked up, and her tail behind her was wagging. Although Mu Qiu never told her Shura's identity personally. But with Lu Qianqian's ice and snow intelligence, combined with the many coincidences when Shura appeared, and Mu Qiu's terrifying strength, Lu Qianqian has concluded from the bottom of her heart that Mu Qiu is the mysterious Yanjai Shura. How? Mu Qiu's eyes were calm, without any sign of panic. The boat will be straight when it reaches the bridge. What does it have to do with me what they want to do? As long as those guys don't mess with me. From beginning to end, Mu Qiu was doing it for the reward of signing in. As for whether to intervene, it had to be in line with Mu Qiu's own interests. As for Lu Qianqian's Shura identity, Mu Qiu did not say anything to defend her. Lu Qianqian's eyes were filled with water, and she also imitated Mu Qiu and narrowed her eyes slightly. The beauty mark under the corner of the eye is extremely eye-catching, I knew you would say that. How about it, boss, have you thought about it? The man in purple robe is suspended in the air, and next to him is the rag doll with the image of a prince. After this is accomplished, you will still be the boss of the Shenlong Society, but the sect has promised you nothing less. A bewitching voice lingered in Wang Deipen's ears. So this is your purpose. Wang Deipen looked at the purple-robed man with an incomprehensible look. Realizing that Wang Deipen's position had begun to waver, the man in purple robe made another bold statement. It seems that Boss Peng is still a little hesitant. Well, let me tell you another news. The man in purple robe lowered his head, and a piece of news that was also important to Wang Deipen dropped like a depth bomb. When the man in purple robe finished speaking, Wang Deipen's pupils shrank slightly and his expression became a little shaken. The purple-robed man and the prince doll stopped talking, and instead looked quietly at the destruction-level guardian below who was entangled in flames. After a while, Wang Deipen suddenly raised his head. Okay, I can cooperate with you. But there is one condition. After everything is done, besides Xiao Hanyan, I also want a woman. The flame called ambition burned crazily in Wang Deipen's eyes. At this moment, he thought of the hateful Yanjai Shura. At the same time, he also recalled the scene that day when Mu Qiu held the ferocious giant sword, his strength doubled, and swept through thousands of corpses. He swore that he must get that big sword. Then, he personally cut off Shura's head. Book friends, Wu, Ju, Ling, Yi, San, Ju, Lu, Yi. Friends who like this book can go in. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 217. Congratulations, you made a wise choice. In front of the long fog, the purple-robed man let out bursts of sinister laughter. Wang Deipen's eyes were sharp. When are you planning to take action? The time is coming, and then there won't even be a need for Boss Peng to do it himself. All we want is your attitude. Wang Deipen's eyes flashed with thought. If he really said that, he would get huge benefits without any effort. He can also use this to eliminate a number of thorns in his side, which will benefit him from both sides. Wang Deipen lowered his head slightly, and the crimson flames that erupted around him subsided at a speed visible to the naked eye. He. Suddenly, Wang Deipen sneered and suddenly raised his head to look at the purple-robed figure in front of him. No wonder people say that your heterogeneous religion is a heresy of mankind. You are really capable of causing trouble. If that's the case, then I want to see what tricks your heterogeneous religion can do this time. Then please wait and see. A creepy sneer echoed in the thick fog. The flow of time in this fog seems to be different from the outside world. Dyer stretched out her hand in the air and felt that the flow of time in this space was obviously faster than the outside world. This is the highest state of constructing an illusion, and what is deceived is the perception of the practitioner. Brother, do you want to go out now? In the misty space, three girls, Mu-Chiu, Dyer, Lu-Chi, and Lu-Chien-Chien, stood quietly in an open space. The thick fog on both sides was dispersed by the burning waves of flames. The blue soul was also reduced to embers under the attack of scorching flames and freezing ice. The main function of this foggy space is imprisonment. There is no fatal threat to those powerful awakened ones. But for ordinary people, let alone the blue soul that transforms into a human form. Even this weird atmosphere, coupled with the speed of time and space that is several times that of the outside world, is enough to make ordinary people collapse and go crazy. Mu-Chiu shook her head. No rush, I have no interest in cleaning up this mess for them. Let's take this as a challenge to them. Mu-Chiu suddenly turned her head, her eyes narrowed slightly and her mouth raised, revealing her sinister nature. Dyer saw the smile on Mu-Chiu's face and understood immediately. She raised her hand, and a suffocating energy wave rippled around her body. His jet black hair also turned into a strange fiery red color in an instant, and a flash of crimson flashed under his eyes. Lu-Chien-Chien on the side was immediately hit by this powerful wave with terrifying pressure. Lu-Chien-Chien felt as if her heart was being tugged hard. The suffocation at that moment made her heart palpitate. Looking at the delicate girl beside Mu-Chiu with horrified eyes, Lu Qianqian's throat rolled and she swallowed. Mu-Chiu's sister is actually a powerful being that has surpassed the S level. Recalling all the provocations she had just faced, Lu-Chien-Chien instantly felt lucky to have survived the disaster. Drops of cold sweat gradually formed on his fair forehead. Mu-Chiu noticed something strange about Lu-Chien-Chien, but on the other hand, Zhu Qi was not affected at all. I immediately understood that this was Dyer's little trick. He shook his head slowly, she was still a little girl after all. As the energy became stronger, dark red mist flashed in Dyer's hand. Countless palm-sized butterflies with strange colors flew out of his hands. The strange butterflies flying all over the sky scattered in all directions, piercing through the thick fog and disappearing. Pink mist gradually flashed through the fog in all directions. Mu-Chiu knew that this was Dyer's method, and the butterfly released also belonged to her clone in a sense. These butterflies travel through the misty space. The flying butterflies are equivalent to walking surveillance instruments. A moment later, Dyer's eyes had completely turned into a bloodthirsty crimson. The little hand was spread out in the air, and a light red light curtain appeared around it. A bunch of pictures have been transmitted back through the flying monster butterflies. I saw one of the foggy spaces. A man in guard's uniform is surrounded by blue ghosts. No, don't come over, don't come over. The man's face was full of panic and fear, and he pulled the trigger tremblingly. With several bang sounds, the rifle in his hand spat out tongues of fire crazily. However, bullets are naturally useless against these ghost corpses. Countless fire bombs penetrated the soul body and penetrated into the gray mist behind. The man's eyes were bloodshot and his arms were shaking. Even after all the bullets in the gun were fired, it still couldn't stop these ghosts from advancing towards him. These corpses didn't make any sound, they just twisted their limbs and surrounded the man. In the blink of an eye, the man in guard uniform was surrounded and devoured by countless blue corpses. The man's wail gradually subsided. Instead, a pale, bloodless male corpse fell to the ground. A blue ghost rose above the male corpse, which was no different from those corpses with blue souls. The ghost that rose from the male corpse looked dull at first, but after a few breaths, it seemed to have some intelligence. The face gradually blurred, and quickly joined the army of corpses around. And the ghost corpse also disappeared under the cover of the fog. This is one of the other party's abilities, plundering the souls of humans and then separating the souls and spirits. Absorbing the living soul can enhance its own strength, and the separated corpse souls are refined into these split souls. Speaking of the realm of souls, Dire, whose main body is the soul-devouring butterfly emperor, has the most say. Such a large number of split souls should have swallowed up no less than the living souls of a city. No wonder this guy has reached the level of destruction. Dire waved her hand, and the scenes in the pale red light curtain in front of her changed one after another. Some ordinary humans were surrounded by the army of corpses, and most of them had a very miserable ending. The living souls were devoured by countless corpses, and finally the corpses were sacrificed and refined into the existence of other people's split souls. A very small number of humans chose to flee for their lives, but they could never escape from this foggy space. In the end, there were many people who collapsed and destroyed themselves. If you want to destroy a person, the most effective way is to destroy him mentally. Miu looked at the tragic endings of many humans with a calm face, and suddenly spoke out. Even some relatively weak awakeners have no way to deal with these insubstantial corpses. Suddenly, Miu saw a familiar figure from the constantly changing light screen. When he saw this person's performance, Miu couldn't help but smile bitterly. In the mist, a bloated man was seen carrying a mountaineering bag. The figure quickly passed through the mist, and even left a trail of after-images behind him. "Damn it, stop chasing me!" Accompanied by the cursing shouts, the bloated man in the picture was the Fat Man. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 218. A group of faint blue flames appeared behind the Fat Man. When the camera zoomed in, I realized that the ghost fires following them were actually blue corpses with confused faces. The Fat Man was being chased by countless corpses, his body seemed to have doubled in speed, his steps were swaying, and after-images were quickly appearing. In the mist beside him, corpses kept reaching out to grab the Fat Man, but every time they were dodged by his flexible body. The figure of the Fat Man was always far away from these corpses. Even so, the Fat Man did not forget to pause. He turned around and made an international friendly gesture to these corpses. "Come after me, fatty, street boy." The corners of Miu's mouth twitched slightly, and she turned to look at Dire. "Next." Dire understood and flicked the channel with her finger. The scene in front of the red light curtain changed again. This time, there was still a familiar white figure standing in the mist. Wearing a white suit, with a straight back, his whole body exudes a cold aura that is unapproachable. The captain of the law enforcement team, Ji Yufeng, is known as the White God of Death. Countless blue corpses all around were chasing towards Ji Yufeng. It seems that he knows Ji Yufeng's strength level. The strength of the corpses in this misty space is also stronger than those targeting ordinary people and low-level awakened people. Ji Yufeng's face was cold, and a silver-white space vortex suddenly appeared in front of him. All the blue corpses that were killed were sucked into the space vortex. Countless sharp space fragments were faintly visible in the whirlpool, cutting and tearing apart these corpses in an instant. Ji Yufeng looked up at the thick gray fog in front of him, and the light screen flickered under his lenses. The next moment, waves of ripple-like space power erupted around Ji Yufeng, sweeping around like a wave. Immediately afterwards, Ji Yufeng's figure swayed, fell into the ripples of space and disappeared. The monster butterfly condensed by Dire was instantly torn apart by the bursting space blade. The light curtain in front of Miu and others suddenly flashed. Ji Yufeng's figure appeared in another misty space. The white figure was holding a space blade, and once it rushed out of the fog, it swept up large space ripples. And countless blue corpses were swept and strangled by the sharp space blades. In this way, Ji Yufeng's figure continued to shuttle through the foggy spaces. Every time he appeared, a large number of corpses were strangled to death. Ji Yufeng has indeed mastered space travel. Mu Qiu narrowed her eyes slightly and watched Ji Yufeng's figure shuttle through the foggy spaces. Lu Qianqian used the ability of illusion to blur the boundaries between illusions and build a passage between two foggy spaces. Ji Yufeng, on the other hand, used the ability to travel through space to directly cross the entire fog and reach another foggy space. But Mu Qiu slowly shook her head as she watched Ji Yufeng's figure passing through every space and rescuing team members who were in danger. The consumption of shuttle space is too great, which is completely out of proportion to the number of people rescued. Even if Ji Yufeng consumes all the energy in his body, he may not be able to save 100 people. The light curtain in front of him kept changing. Mu Qiu saw some humans who were surrounded by corpses, resisted tenaciously, and finally died of despair. I also saw some powerful awakened people defeating many corpses, but they were trapped in the foggy space and lost themselves. Mu Qiu also saw some familiar figures among them. Suddenly, the screen stopped in a space barrier shrouded in thick fog. In the center of the thick fog, a petite figure wearing a purple shirt was seen standing in the sky above the thick fog. Below were numerous blue corpses with their teeth and claws splayed, all gathering in Shueqinya's direction to attack. The soul fluctuations all over the sky gathered into a huge tornado. It was like a ferocious giant python swooping towards Shueqinya. "Brother, you are not an easy student." Dai rarely stared at the figure in the light screen, her red lips slightly parted. Shueqinya was seen standing in the air as if being lifted up by the grey mist. Shueqinya's eyes turned a deep purple color, and she suddenly raised her right hand. A black round ring on the middle finger shone with a strange luster. A majestic corpse energy emerged from it and instantly enveloped the swooping soul python. In an instant, the latter seemed to have gained intelligence, and a hint of fear flashed in his illusory pupils. But before he could use any force to break free, the grey corpse energy that filled the sky swallowed him whole. Immediately, the majestic corpse energy gathered into the black round ring on Shueqinya's fingertips. And a lot of corpse energy also poured into Shueqinya's body through the black ring as a channel. At this moment, a bright light flashed in Mu Qiu's eyes. "Here, I remember that little sister Qinya's ability is not to control corpses," Lu Qianqian exclaimed. Several people watched helplessly as Shueqinya took the majestic corpse energy wrapped in the soul tornado into her body, and they were speechless for a moment. At least one thing is certain. Dyer stared deeply at the purple shirt girl in the light curtain. Her powers are not just as simple as controlling corpses. In the picture, a large group of blue corpses have condensed under Shueqinya's feet, looking like a tide of corpses. It can be seen that the initiator of this fog barrier seemed to have noticed the special ability of Shueqinya. But then, Shueqinya's figure floated in the air, and her black hair was messy in the air. I saw a huge black figure condensed from the corpse gas behind her. The figure was very blurry, and only a human figure could be vaguely seen, but the height was several feet long. And when this tall black shadow was formed, it actually waved its huge palm to grab the blue corpses on the ground. After a large number of corpses were caught, they were thrown directly into the deep mouth. The corpses bared their teeth and claws, and wailed silently, but they were powerless in front of this huge black shadow. As a large group of corpses were swallowed by the black shadow behind Shueqinya. The size of the black shadow was also increasing rapidly, and the energy radiated from its body was also rising steadily. This ability is somewhat inconsistent with the original corpse control. Mu Qiu stared at the giant shadow behind Shueqinya, his eyes flashing. However, at this moment, in the barrier where Shueqinya was, the fog in the distance suddenly gathered, gradually gathering into a fog giant like a towering tree. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 219. The fog in the sky quickly gathered, and the violent tornado turned into a fog giant whose size covered the sky. The fog giant was covered by fog, and his pair of dark blue eyes were like ghosts. The majestic pressure swept through the fog, and the wind blew. The fog giant rushed directly towards Shwekanya. In contrast, the black shadow monster formed by the billowing black smoke behind Shwekanya was just like a child. In an instant, the black shadow monster collided with the huge body of the fog giant. The figure of the black shadow monster was blurred, and only the outline of the person could be vaguely recognized. His eyes also showed a dark purple color like Shwekanya. The purple light in Shwekanya's eyes became deeper and deeper. And the dark purple color in the pupils of the huge black shadow monster in front of him became more and more intense. What is amazing is that the black shadow monster and the fog giant collided brazenly, and the wind swept violently. The energy emanating from the fog giant was actually absorbed by the black shadow monster. The energy emanating from the black shadow monster became more and more huge, and the fog monster's body that originally covered the sky also shrank a circle out of thin air. For a moment, relying on the energy absorbed from the fog, the black shadow monster that appeared behind Shwekanya actually tied with the giant condensed from the fog, and their momentum was evenly matched. However, the next second, a large area of gray-white haze suddenly emerged in the space. All of this sudden influx of gray mist all merged into the gradually weakening fog giant. The energy around the fog giant surged again, and its body grew several times larger than before out of thin air. Suddenly, a childish voice echoed in the space, ethereal and weird. "I like the energy in your body." The originally calm fog space became tense because of the sudden weird voice. Then, the fog giant opened his arms and pounced on the black shadow monster. The huge fog that covered the sky instantly surrounded Shwekanya's petite figure, and the black shadow monster condensed in front of her. Even so, the majestic fog emitted by the fog giant was still constantly absorbed by Shwekanya. The increasingly powerful spiritual energy was transformed into corpse chi in Shwekanya's body through the fog. However, just like an energy converter, it always has its own limits in terms of function. In the red light curtain, Shwekanya, who was shrouded in a gray-white fog, gradually showed a painful expression on her face. "Brother, it seems that your disciple seems to be in trouble." Looking at Shwekanya's pale face in the picture, her throat stagnated, and she seemed to be suffocated under the fog. Muchu's eyes were fixed on the black fluctuations faintly emanating from Shwekanya's body. Shwekanya's breathing gradually became rapid. Looking at the fog giant close at hand, the purple light in the depths of her eyes instantly released to the maximum. Amidba. However, the next second, a deep shout suddenly resounded throughout the entire space. This shout was like the angry eyes of a diamond, and hundreds of ghosts retreated and thousands of evil spirits were annihilated. Bundles of Buddha's light instantly penetrated the layers of foggy space. The haze in the sky instantly dissipated under the illumination of the Buddha's light. The blue corpses that were bearing their fangs and claws around were also turned into nothingness under the Buddha's light. And all the humans trapped in the fog were shocked the moment they heard this Buddhist chant. Even the mood that was originally mixed with fear and uneasiness seemed to be relieved a lot in the moment of the Buddha's light. Everyone was surprised to find that the foggy space they were in also disintegrated as quickly as ice and snow melting. "This is..." A guard stood up from the ground with trembling bloodshot eyes. The haze that permeated the surroundings disappeared. The outlines of tall buildings began to emerge in front of their eyes, and the texture of the road surface under their feet gradually became clearer. Only then could they see the original appearance of the city. But then, many coalition soldiers who woke up from the foggy space became terrified again. They saw corpses with empty expressions and pale faces all around them. Most of these corpses were ordinary humans without superpowers when they were alive. There were no scars on the body, and there was not even a trace of blood on the ground. But the expressions on the faces of these corpses were either dull and empty, or extremely terrified, as if their souls were hooked out. Some of them were stripped of their souls by corpses, and some were scared to death by these blurred and terrifying blue corpses. These guards have also experienced life and death, and they can see that their former comrades in arms died in such a weird and terrifying state. In addition to the panic of escaping from the desperate foggy space, they were overwhelmed with emotions. Ji Yufeng, Wei Ying, Wang Daipen, He Anping and others also emerged from the fog. Soon, everyone's eyes were focused on the same direction. In the middle of the coalition team, a short bald monk was sitting cross-legged. The monk's eyes were half closed, and dazzling golden beams were emitting from his body. It was the short monk in front of him who just chanted the Buddha's name and broke the fog to save everyone. Master Wufa, one of the three guardians of Yuhei base. You, what do you see? Suddenly, another exclamation attracted the attention of everyone present. Everyone looked in the direction of the sound, and saw a large mass of gray-white fog suddenly appearing not far away. Then, a large amount of smoke surged out and occupied most of the street in an instant. The hurricane turned, and a huge fog giant swept out from the billowing smoke. Before everyone could react, the fog giant, whose whole body was entangled in the fog, but only had a pair of dark blue pupils, suddenly grabbed the ground with his big hands. On the street not far away, a girl in a purple shirt was lying on the ground with a pale face. At the critical moment, a corner of a fluttering black robe suddenly appeared in front of the girl. Feeling the air around her solidify a little, her hair was blown by the breeze, and the frost and snow blew across her cheeks with a hint of coolness. Teacher. Shueqianya looked at the black figure standing in front of her, her expression dazed. Mu Qiu turned around and smiled indifferently at the girl. At the same time, the giant hand of the huge giant in front of him had already grabbed down. A hurricane hit his ears, and Mu Qiu raised his hand slightly, and his body was instantly covered by ice-blue mist. A large piece of blue frost suddenly burst out from the palm of his hand, and instantly covered the body of the mist giant like a violent snowstorm. An amazing scene happened. The frost began to extend continuously toward the body along the huge palm of the mist giant. In the end, the giant's huge body that reached the upper level was frozen inch by the violent wind and snow released by Mu Qiu. With just one move, the powerful mist giant was subdued. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Mu Qiu, and most people had admiration and joy on their faces. Only a small number of high-level awakeners and awakeners who specialized in flexibility could perceive the doorway in it, and they looked at Mu Qiu with horror. They could feel that the mist giant in front of them was composed of pure soul power. The seemingly fierce attack was simply a mental shock. Although it is far from the level of destruction, in terms of spirit alone, it has reached the S level. But Mu Qiu not only subdued it with one blow, but also used the power of frost to freeze this huge monster composed entirely of souls. This is incredible. Freeze the soul. Mu Qiu's performance can't help but make the prestige of Yu Hai Bingjun in everyone's heart rise again. Just as everyone stared at it, I saw that Mu Qiu had condensed a palm-sized ice cone in his hand at some point. Then the ice cone flashed a cold light in the air at lightning speed, and in the blink of an eye it had pierced into the body of the mist giant that was frozen into an ice sculpture. Caw-caw dash. Just hearing several loud caw-caw sounds, the huge body of the mist giant instantly collapsed, turning into ice crystal fragments and floating in the air. The ice crystals dispersed, and I saw that a short figure had appeared in the air at some point. Everyone looked up and found that the short figure was actually a cartoon prince doll wearing a crown. A black light flashed in the deep pupils of the prince doll. First, he stared at Shueqianya behind Mu Qiu, then turned his head and looked at Mu Qiu in a black robe. "Human, I remember you." The childish voice came out of the doll's mouth, ethereal but without any emotion. While the doll was speaking, a terrifying mental wave spread out, making the people below extremely frightened. This is a terrible heretic of the destruction level. There are many people who miss me, but coincidentally, they are generally short-lived. What came towards him was the terrifying pressure of a destruction-level strongman. But Mu seemed to be unaffected at all, with a faint smile on his face. Then, he bent his fingers, and a thin ice needle as thin as a hair condensed at his fingertips. With a flick of his finger, the ice needle flashing with cold light shot out like an arc, drawing a beautiful arc in the air. The ice needle instantly penetrated the body of the puppet, and the extreme coldness burst out. In an instant, the body of the prince puppet was frozen into a ball of ice and slowly fell down. With the same crack, the frozen body of the puppet shattered to the ground. The body of this puppet is just a soul clone like those corpses. Mu turned around, rubbed Shwekinya's head, and turned to look at the people behind him with a dazed look. Mu shrugged slightly. "Why are you looking at me? Keep on going. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord." Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 220. There was a loud sound of rolling wheels on the asphalt-paved road. I saw a huge convoy galloping from the end of the road. Tanks, military vehicles, off-road vehicles, motorcycles, the various types of vehicles are dizzying. www. We even saw a group of tall high-tech mechas behind the team that spewed tail flames from their feet. Perhaps the only thing they have in common are the old scratches and blood stains that have not yet dried on the bodies and mechas. This is the human coalition that crossed the last city and rescued Dongshan base. At this moment, they were only a few kilometers away from their final destination, Dongshan base. After experiencing the murderous fog in Anyuan City, everyone felt exhausted physically and mentally. Time and space are chaotic in the foggy space, and the weird ghost corpse is even more difficult to guard against. The number of ordinary guards in the team was reduced by more than 40% in that foggy murderous attack. After successive battles, even the awakened ones in the team suffered a lot of losses. Death is the norm in the apocalypse, and even some dangerous tasks may involve the possibility of death at any time. But no one thought that this seemingly vigorous mission would be so dangerous, and so many people would be lost before reaching the final location. They have become accustomed to the extremely dangerous S-class heretics, but the real danger is the mysterious existence hiding in the dark. Some people are already feeling timid. If this continues, let alone rescuing other bases, they themselves will have no way to survive. But now they are on the verge of taking action. At this moment, in a military vehicle in the front row of the team, Wei Ying and Ji Yufeng were sitting side by side. The voice of a member of the law enforcement team came from the communicator in my ear. "Captain, drone surveillance shows that there is a large wave of corpses 3 kilometers ahead." Ji Yu's eyes turned silvery white as she looked into the distance. In her sight, there were energy fluctuations unique to zombies in the distance. From a distance, they seemed to form a raging tidal wave. The corpse wave in front should be the corpse group that invaded Dongshan base. The number seems to be, no less than 50,000. When Wei Ying heard this, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Although tens of thousands of zombies are already a lot, they must also include many high-level zombies. But this number was already considered a small number compared to the countless zombies they had exterminated in the ruins of the city. Ji Yufeng nodded indifferently. "Inform Feng Jun to contact Dongshan base, and the coalition forces will break through the zombie wave from behind." Feng Jun is the envoy from Dongshan base sent to Yuhei to ask for help this time. "Inform everyone that the war is coming." At this point, the final battle, codenamed Redemption, finally begins. At the same time, in the ruins of a city dozens of kilometers away from the Yuhei base, the surrounding houses collapsed and fell to the ground one after another, making a thunderstorm-like rumble. The earth trembled slightly, rubble flying on the ground, and smoke billowing. It turned out to be a large, well-equipped high-tech mecha coming from a distance. Looking around, the city streets are actually filled with tall gray-black mechas. These mechas were armed with high-tech equipment, with tail flames coming out from behind, and they were speeding through the streets of the city. Wherever the mecha passed by, there were countless broken limbs and broken arms of zombies, and blood splattered on the ground. The leader was a dark red streamlined mecha, holding a mechanical broken blade stained with mottled blood. "Captain, it is estimated that it will take half a day to arrive at Yuhei base." A reminder from his subordinates came from the mecha's built-in communication device. A man in the red mecha with prominent cheekbones and a sharp mouth and monkey cheeks said casually, "Notify the other side that it's time to start taking action." At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared from under the red mecha. "Help, help, help me." I saw a ragged, skinny man crawling out of the sewer on the side. Seeing the speeding mecha, the survivor man's face showed a smile that was about to survive. But then, the huge human mecha in front of him seemed to have disappeared, and he raised his big feet and trampled down. With a pop sound, blood spurted out, and the red mecha stepped away. After trampling the survivor to death, the sharp-mouthed man in the mecha seemed to have crushed an insect to death and showed no reaction. The sharp-mouthed man casually put on the headphones and slowly pressed a red button next to the controller. The Yuhei collapse plan is activated.